Alright, in the first video we talked about removing toxins, and so now we'll go into some of the other protocols. The second protocol is to replace and regulate your gut flora. So when it comes to bacteria in the gut, there's going to be, good guys and bad guys. Bacteria that's going to cause issues and not really help you, and bacteria that's going to help you digest. As SRA survivors, we're going to have a lot of the bad guys because, one, from all of the trauma and the stress, there's just going to be overgrowth, but also a lot of us have experienced testing where we've literally been injected with bad guys. So to remove all the bad guys, for me, what I needed to do was one course of antibiotics, which actually cleared everything out pretty well. And then after that, there would be cycles of where the gut dysbiosis would come back, and then I would address that with something natural like oregano, which I would eat in oil or hot butter with bread. So depending on what level of bad guys you have in your system, you may or may not need the antibiotics, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell you how to do that, but I can tell you how it worked for me. When you get the bad guys cleared out, they will come back in cycles, but the cycles will get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until there's more good guys than bad guys. So I would incorporate the bread, the oregano, and the olive oil or butter into your regular routine so that you can have a practice of clearing out the bad guys. And then you don't have to eat it so much when you've noticed that the cycles aren't repeating as fast or as strongly. The second step is to gently replace the good guys in cycles. So step 1 and step 2 are kind of going on at the same time. You'll want to take 2 probiotic drinks, which are the ones that come in those little bottles with the foil top. The brands that I used and worked really well for me are Yakult and Activia. It seems like those 2 brands have strains of bacteria that work really well together. You may want to experiment with different types of yogurt drinks and see what works for your gut, but I think it worked well enough for me, so I'm giving that recommendation for those 2 brands. You'll want to alternate 1 small sip of each of those drinks at every meal. So at breakfast, you'll want to take a small sip of the Yakult before breakfast. And at lunch, you'll want to take a small sip of the Activia before breakfast. And then at dinner, you want to take a small sip of the Yakult again. And then the next day at breakfast, you want to take a small sip of the Activia again. So you're alternating very small sips of the probiotic drinks at every meal. And what that's going to do is to gently rebuild the good guys in your gut. And over time, it will teach your gut to regulate. And it's kind of like working with your emotional system, your emotional regulation system. Over time, your gut will know what it's like to be healthy. Once you've gotten to the point where the cycles of the bad guys have diminished enough and the cycles of the good guys have increased enough and you feel really good, you're starting to feel really good, what you can start to do is start introducing foods that gave you problems before. By introducing small quantities of these foods, you're actually teaching the gut microbiome to process them safely. So it's not that your gut is, allergic or intolerant to these foods. It's that the good bacteria did not come through enough to process them effectively. There wasn't enough of them before, or they just didn't know how to process those types of foods effectively. So you can basically start to build back in a much more rich and varied diet. For me, at the start of my journey, I was not able to tolerate gluten and dairy, but as I built up my gut microbiome and I introduced those things in, which was terrifying at first because I was like, I've been told my entire life that those 2 things are going to make me bleed and are very dangerous to me. But when I started incorporating them in, my gut microbiome learned with me, and now I don't have any restrictions. Of course, there's all the toxins and GMOs and stuff in our food system, but that's a whole other topic. And lastly, what you'll need to do is eat prebiotics during this process to help the good guys. So prebiotics are basically what the good bacteria feed on, and that's stuff like leafy greens and legumes. And if you have trouble tolerating those, you can follow the protocol that I just mentioned, which is slowly incorporating them in as you are doing your sips of the probiotic drinks. Next protocol in the next part.